Hi, this is Jon Smart. Welcome to the next episode of the Sooner Safer Happier podcast. And as always, we're talking to practitioners and leaders who are leading ways of working in their organisations. I'm delighted to welcome Rob Berini from UBS. So, hi, Rob.
Hi, John. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. So, Rob, if you'd like to maybe just tell us a bit about yourself and your background and your role and what you're doing.
Sure. I'm with Wealth Management Americas at UBS. I've been with UBS for about 3 years. I lead digital innovation and enablement for UBS Wealth Management Americas. So, managing director. I joined UBS after a career largely in consulting and solutions. So, I was with IBM for about 13 years, Cisco for a handful of years, Genpact for a couple of years, and Deloitte for 7 years. So had an opportunity to experience working with firms on their ways of working and on design and other issues like that as a consultant. But as I say, I came to UBS about 3 years ago.
So that's interesting. So having, with your background, Rob, then you've seen lots of different companies and lots of different data points, and I guess that gives you a good position in terms of like viewing some of the patterns and the anti patterns in your current context.
Yeah, absolutely. When Deloitte formed Deloitte Digital, and we acquired a small design company called Ubermind, they were an agile shop, and at the time, I had a number of initiatives that I was running. I had the chance to basically be a product owner, but not in name, just because I was the product owner, right? I was basically helping them prioritize the value of the work that they were doing. Um, but also have had experience to work on, both kind of some nascent agile projects and then some scaled agile projects using the different scaled frameworks that are common in the industry today, and certainly at large banks. So it's been good to kind of come into UBS with that background and context and see where we were and where we've come over the past 3 years.
Yeah, that's good to have that variety of experience, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
And and then kind of starting with the punchline, Rob.
sure.
What would you say are your top three learnings around improving how we do what we do? You know, what would your top three pieces of advice be to other people who are trying to improve ways of working?
Yeah. So for the past about 18 months, we UBS have been undergoing an agile transformation, and we haven't always been faithful to this first learning I'll share, but my learning, and I think others' learning, is approach agile transformation with business agility itself. Right, try to use the same methods. Try to avoid a waterfall approach to agile transformation. So incorporate focus and feedback and um, ability to pivot and understanding the outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. And we can come back to that, but that's my number one learning is how do you try to encourage the team that is driving the transformation to embrace new ways of working itself. My second learning is somewhat related to one that you have in your book and some of the speeches. I think you say invite over inflict. I would add or maybe substitute inspire over inflict. Right. So one of the things that we've tried to focus on is sharing stories, stories of success, also bringing in outside learning. So, people like yourselves and other leaders that can bring a different perspective so that we're not so prescriptive relative to our own version of Agile. Really continue to articulate the why, continue to ground people in first principles, continue to focus on the mindset, all those kinds of things. But yeah, inspire over inflict, I think, is one of the other key learnings. And then the third is to meet people where they are. So there's definitely some energy to try to achieve ways of working transformation quickly and get all the teams kind of on the same page and working in the same ways of working. But it's very important to understand the local context, to understand the specific challenges that various teams are facing, to not try to force them to adopt, particularly if they're new to it or unfamiliar with it, or if they came into the year with project based funding, which a lot of our teams did when we were going through the transformation. To just recognize, okay, well, you already have this scope on your plate. You're not really necessarily in a position to adopt everything that we're encouraging you to adopt. So how can we be receptive and maybe put in place some compensating routines, and again, just kind of meet people where they are, to help them along in their journey and be supportive of them to embrace, in a more kind of natural way, some of these ways of working.
I love that. And it's, the pace of change is determined by the speed of unlearning, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
You can't
Absolutely.
you can't you can't force the pace of change. So that third one really resonates regarding meeting people where they're at.
Yeah.
And
And
I
particularly when, if, like we've done, a lot of organizations our size do as well, is you kind of start with the technology book of work, at least, not necessarily just the technology org. But that necessitates that kind of other people are not along for the journey, really. And so you have to meet them where they are as well, in terms of how do you help them to understand the benefits, pros and cons of Agile, but what are their expectations? How do we meet their expectations? How do we engage them in the process, but not start throwing a bunch of jargon at them that makes the unfamiliar seem like, what is this alien thing that's happening over with our tech portfolio? How do we stay engaged? How do we continue to influence the direction of some of the investments that we're making, et cetera?
Yeah, I also really like the slight change in the words from invite over inflict to inspire over inflict.
Hmm.
Um, I like that. I like that, and that conjures up images of. So you said storytelling,
Yes.
and but I think that also, for me, brings in the whole incentive piece as well because it's inspiring people. So it's still
Yes.
what my takeaway from your choice of that word is. It's still internal. It's still I'm inspired to do this. It's not.
Yes.
It's not inflicting.
Yeah.
But I think it also conjures up some incentive in there as well. In my mind, even if that's an implicit incentive.
Yeah. 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 And it's very hard to, when, and we went through a big effort globally to try to come to a common playbook and common ways of working, which has some benefits, and particularly if it's kind of like a foundational base thing, right? It's basically in shuhari, it's shu, right? So like give people some sense of what's good, um, but I think for us it's been more important to be able to um, show how it works in practice, and the outcomes people are achieving, and the people that are getting attention are the people that are driving those outcomes, not the people that are maybe have traditional ways of valuing kind of a hero culture, or nights and weekends work, or whatever it may be, like that we're really focused. Oh wow, the people that are driving outcomes are the ones that are getting highlighted, and the ones whose stories we're telling.
Yeah. So if I play back the opposites of your learnings, then I
Yeah.
think I would be right in saying that what you don't advise, Rob, is to take a waterfall approach to agile,
Right.
to have an agile project or program with a bunch of milestones planned in a waterfall manner with 6 months to 12 months of planning and a we are agile milestone in the plan. Number
Yeah.
two, you would not advocate inflicting capital A agile, and I'm slightly using my own language and terms in here as well. Capital A agile on two people involuntarily, and you would also not
Right.
advocate not meeting people where they're at, but rather, I think related to number two, kind of you would not advocate forcing change on people which might be 5 steps away from where they are rather than 1 step away from where they are.
Yeah, I mean, up to that last one, it'll dramatically slow people down, right? It just it'll. I mean, the point of this is obviously not agile. The point of it is to get the right stuff out the door quicker, and to the extent that you're slowing people down by forcing them to unlearn and then relearn and then unlearn and relearn. Um, it may be necessary, but you have to kind of pace that out in a way that is, just like any change management, that is easy to absorb and embrace. And listen, we haven't been always faithful to um, the first learning either, as I think I mentioned. I mean, there were definitely some milestones, right, and kind of what we were trying to do, but we also had to also incorporate and communicate to people that, um, even to the extent that we were making some structural changes and some others to get us in a better position to embrace Agile, it really is the start of the journey, right? That some of those preconditions and having the playbook is there to say, okay, now you're leaving, right, and going out the door. Now, in terms of the pace of adoption, that's going to be very kind of team dependent and dependent on people's local context.
Yeah, yeah. And in terms of improving outcomes, Rob, is it all about agile?
No, for sure, right? And first off, what is Agile, right? There's different ways of thinking about Agile, and we've tried to, and it's a little bit to this Inspire point as well. We've tried to expose people to um, complementary emerging ways of working, complementary practices, not make it so prescriptive. It's kind of this balance of, yes, there's a playbook, yes, there's a way that, if you're just starting out, that you can do things. But also, when you're thinking about the advisors you're serving or the clients you're serving or the stakeholders you're serving, incorporate aspects of design thinking, empathy mapping, and journey mapping, and other tools to have that deep understanding. That there's I mean, a lot of this is already incorporated in Agile, or at least Agile done well, but there's a systems thinking dynamic to this. There's a complex adaptive systems aspect of this. There's obviously a DevOps aspect to this. There's there are lean in kind of both of its definitions. And when I say that, there's a lean kind of manufacturing total production system aspect to what we can embrace. Um, but there's also what may be a misapplication of the term lean, but the lean startup kind of thing, which is a little bit closer to design thinking.
Mm.
But how do we have more of an experimental mindset and a build, test, learn mindset? All of those, in my mind, come together to improve our ways of working and to help make us what I think our ambition is to be a world-class product-led company, right? That's the kind of the goal. Is not the goal isn't to have agile adoption, scaled agile, or anything like that, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the means to an end. It's not the end.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah. So, in terms of your context, Rob, can you just explain a bit about what is the context you're operating within?
You mean today or historically or?
Yeah, well, I mean the company, a bit about the
Oh,
organization, a bit about the context where you're today, where there is a focus on improving how you do what you do.
gotcha. Yeah. So we are obviously, particularly post the merger of with Credit Suisse, one of the largest financial institutions in the world. Within the United States, this was what we focus on. We have over 6,000 advisors. Between our U.S. digital organization, which is the product side and design side of our agile combined agile organization, and our CDIO and technology partners. Um, and again, we focus primarily on how do we serve the needs of financial advisors that are, in many cases, small businesses, right, themselves, and their clients, which are typically high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals who are very demanding and have complex needs. Um, through digital propositions, right? So how are we complementing advisors with the right tools, their teams with the right tools, and ultimately our end clients with the right tools? And the competitive context is, we are going up against, maybe in terms of wealth management, we're, by far the largest, but in terms of just overall size, scale, and assets, we're competing against some of the biggest financial service institutions in the world, some of which I think you've spoken to before, right? And they are similarly kind of on some stage of this journey. So we need to do it because we need to be more responsive to our clients. We need to do it because we need to be more responsive to our advisors. We need to do it because the competitive landscape is moving quickly. The technology landscape is moving quickly, and the talent landscape is ever more competitive. So we need to be attractive to people that are used to being surrounded by people that understand agile ways of working and design thinking and lean and DevOps, et cetera. So all of those reasons are drivers for embracing new ways of working within UBS broadly and more specifically within Wealth Management Americas.
And in terms of the how, so that's I guess that's the context and the why for change. In terms of at a
Yeah.
high level, in terms of how you're going about changing, what are some of the high level approaches that you have taken or are taking?
Yeah. So we we were facilitated by um, a global team that was helping to define and bring together some of the commonalities of what we were already doing from ways of working. So prior to uh, more of this global enterprise-wide um, transformation effort, each division was in some stage of their own, adoption of new ways of working. So, and in fact, we had kind of, had a small group, a sharing session. It was almost like a secret society or something, where we were just kind of sharing, like, what are you learning? What are you learning? And so this was an effort to start to bring some of that together and scale it, because for some of the organizations, while they had embraced agile ways of working, there wasn't maybe a scaling model, right? And for others, maybe there was an aspect of, oh, I've got agile teams, but I'm not focused on OKRs, or I don't understand the governance, or I don't have the right kind of team of team structure. So um, part of the effort from working with our global transformation office is to guide and steer some of those guardrails, right? In terms of, okay, here's what we think would be useful for us to kind of converge on relative to what we've learned so far and what relative to what the different divisions are doing. Within that, it's been up to each division to kind of define its own understanding of what are our value streams, how do we organize our teams best to the work and ambition that we're trying to get done, um, how and where do we have COEs that support those streams of value and teams of teams that are doing agile working, how do we align our teams to capacity based, um, uh, ideally long-lived teams. Although we're going to go through a few change cycles of this, right? We're not going to get it right the first time or the second time. Um, so that has been up to each division. In our case, is Wealth Management America to steer that. So I happen to sit on the U.S. digital / product side. I've partners on the CDIO / tech side that work with me to kind of make sure that we are collectively landing in the right space and that we are giving our organization an opportunity to upskill um, in alignment with where we're trying to take our ways of working. So, and that has also been a bit of a compliment. There's a global enterprise um, level initiative at learning, at boot camps to bring people in, at kind of web-based training, et cetera, et cetera. But then within our divisions, we have routines to augment and extend that, right? To really help people in their own context, or to do some immersive coaching, or that for teams that need that. So we've been continuing to monitor and adjust what's needed in our division in terms of complementary learning, and to extend a lot of the global learning that has been defined is very much on just the agile topic, right? And so trying to extend and embrace some of the learnings from other ways of working, as well as recognizing that listen, in order to be a good product owner, you're kind of like a CEO slash small business owner. So you have to know finance and operations and marketing and design and, all these, which is, a lot of people are maybe coming into this role having been platform owners or project managers. And that's a very different job. So how do we understand kind of where people are? What skills are they coming in with? And how do we help them broaden and expand their skills so they can basically be CEO of their product?
That's a great point. That last point, needing to know enough about finance, ops, depending on what your role is, where you're sitting, if you're not
Yeah.
already sitting in
Yeah.
ops, knowing enough
Yeah.
about ops, knowing enough about the end-to-end flow of value, knowing about the implications of
Right.
what decisions you make on people upstream and downstream of you. I think that's a really good point, and I think that's part of the pivot of ways of working, going from very much stovepiped role-based silos, where you just, from the first industrial revolution, extreme specialization, you just do your task, you pass it over the fence, you don't
Yeah.
you're not even incentivized to know what happens downstream. Quite the
Yeah.
opposite, you're incentivized to compete. It's almost compete, which is not my problem. The hole's on your side of the boat might be sinking, but
Yeah.
I've done my bit.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting point. And I was talking to someone recently on exactly this point, which was decisions were being made in the pivot to from role-based silos to business plus tech multidisciplinary teams. Decisions were being made which affected ops, operations
Yeah.
downstream, and and they were kind of a bit blind to the fact that this was happening. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really important observation for anyone or any organizations going on this journey. But you don't just need to learn how to be a product owner and
Yeah.
really focus on the why of what you're doing as well as what you're doing, but yeah, to be like a mini CEO.
Yeah. And some of the things that you just said, um, maybe rethink or extend kind of that comment, which is so you need both peripheral awareness of the full flow of value, not just the flow of value from the actual organization, and understanding kind of what are the implications for downstream or what are the implications upstream, um, but also that not that everybody comes into this role understanding theory of constraints and Little's law and like weighted shortage of and all those kinds of things from an ops perspective, or how do I translate a uh, an NPV or an ROI to a client outcome to, okay, what does this mean for me prioritizing uh, the backlog for this next iteration or next sprint? So it's all those things. It's at a micro level. You need to be multidisciplinary to work within your team and be CEO of your product, but you also need to have those multidisciplinary skills so that you have the appropriate peripheral awareness to understand the implications of decisions that you're making.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So in terms of like a pivot in ways of working, would you say this is like one of the biggest pivots in how we as people organize, for a very long time?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it is, it, uh, it is one of those kind of great transformations in how we are adapting to the nature of the work, right? And because the nature of the work is emergent and because the technology landscape changes so rapidly and there's so many demands and even the kind of underlying capabilities need to evolve so quickly, that it's just not well suited to Taylorism, right? Right.
Yeah,
So, but we still have the remnants of like all over the place, right? In
yeah,
terms of org structures and the remnants of scientific management, and not all of that stuff goes out the window either. But it is to use the kind of complex adaptive system language. I mean, it is moving from Mount Fuji problems to rolling landscape problems of just like I don't know if I walk this way, what happens? If I walk this way, what happens? And that is, uh, I don't even think that we're quite there yet. In a way, like we have the evidence of what practices we can share across organizations and what seems to work better, at least. But I don't know that we've kind of fully kind of landed on the equivalent of scientific management, which is say, okay, listen, now we got it right,
Mm.
and we have the right way of kind of, and maybe there isn't kind of one way like that, but how the different disciplines are kind of coming together. Um, is very interesting at this particular stage of the transformation. It'll be uh, truly interesting to see kind of where we collectively land in 10 years, because even though the Snowbird Summit happened, what, 2001 or something, 2000, right? So Agile's been with us, at least by that name, for some time, and before that for even longer. But my sense is it's only been in the past 10 years that organizations have really started embracing these ways of working. So the next 10 years, I think, will be particularly interesting in terms of how do we continue to progress and to challenge what we're doing today, right? In terms of particularly scaling these ways of working.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it, as you said, it's like in the last 10 years, and even then in the last 10 years, around organizations improving their ways of working, because we have a new means of production with the age of
Yeah.
digital. We have, like going from
Yes.
the Stone Age to the Bronze Age, we have new tools at our
Yeah.
disposal. um, and yes, I think even 10 years ago, that's still early adopters, in
Yeah.
terms of organizational agility, not
Yeah.
only agile in software development, which is
Yeah.
the Agile Manifesto origins, is in the context of software development, which is an emergent
Yes.
activity, hence the Agile
Yes.
Manifesto. So I think there is
Yeah.
now a realization that this needs to, I think, and then when you look at the impediments in an organization to the delivery of value, and you realize that now they're no longer in app dev software development, they're now outside of it. It's the portfolio management process, it's the HR process,
Yes.
it's how we incentivize
Yes.
people, it's also how we lead people. um, and
Yeah.
and you mentioned, Taylorism and scientific management. So we it's interesting how in organizations today you can trace the DNA of our ways of working all the way back to 1771, the beginning of the
Right.
first industrial revolution. Never mind Taylorism, you can go
Yeah.
further back,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
back to the very first factory system in Derbyshire, and the DNA is alive and kicking today in
Yes.
large companies, especially in service industries, knowledge industries, where you can't actually see the inventory on the factory floor.
Yeah. 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 And to the extent that the transformation tends to be happening within the technology part or technology adjacent parts of the organization, um, it's interesting to kind of be in the lead of that change of ways of working, because it hasn't necessarily um, taken root in other functions that perhaps are more faithful to those prior ways of working. But it's we've talked a lot about within our organization. We're not trying to necessarily force the change or even influence the change directly in those functions, at least yet, and maybe we never will. But you can't change one part of a system without influencing the other parts. So either the organizational antibodies are going to attack, us, or we're going to change the system by virtue of the different mindsets, the different methods, the different ways of working, the different expectations we have, the different kind of talent um, makeup that we have. Which I think it'll be the latter or some combination thereof, right? Where we'll converge on, some new way of working. That again, I think that's where the kind of 10-year projection goes out, because to the extent that these new ways of working have been largely adopted by tech organizations and design organizations, and the organizations within, or those organizations within organizations, um, it'll be interesting to see kind of as this kind of starts to hit the functional world and the broader machinery of large organizations, how do we change and embrace them, and also then learn from those parts of the organization, right, in terms of our own ways of working.
Yeah, and I think that touches on something you said earlier, Rob, about agile, lean production in particular. It is it
Yeah.
it isn't agile everything, is it? You like that
Yeah.
itself is an anti-pattern to try to agile everything.
Yeah.
So I think if you're in an operational type role or area, and it's
Yeah.
not about lots of emergent, unique change, then
Yeah.
actually kind of the lean body of knowledge is more applicable than agility and then the agile body of knowledge.
Yeah, and I think for us also just again maybe abstracting the common values and the principles common to a lot of those ways of working, which is um, maybe not identically expressed in each of those, but certainly empiricism, feedback loops, multidisciplinary teams, and multidisciplinary individuals, or at least T-shaped individuals, a learning organization, continuous improvement. Um, I think things like psychological safety would kind of fall into that as well. There's just when you can kind of isolate. Well, these are the things. These are the attributes of our ways of working, regardless of whether you put them under the label of agile or lean or design thinking or DevOps or whatever it may be. This is what we're trying to infuse in the way that we manage our organization and get work done.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And they, as I'm sure you know, there's a common origin, which is Japan after the Second World War,
Yeah,
Deming's
yeah,
influence,
yeah.
and as you said, a lot
Yes,
in common between agile and lean. As you said, flow, respect for
yes,
people, continuous improvement in particular.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
the
yeah,
key difference is with lean, you minimize variability and you have the notion of
yeah,
standardized work, which is an innovation killer, an extreme
yeah,
version of that being Six Sigma. With
yeah, yeah.
agile, you want variance and you want
Yes,
optionality because you just
yeah,
don't know because you've never done it before. So I think there's a
yeah,
key. I think what
yeah.
you're talking about here, Rob, is there's a key learning here, which is don't try to agile everything. It's
Yes,
there are some
yeah,
things
yeah,
in
yeah,
common
for
like
sure.
flow and respect for people and continuous improvement, and then there are some
Yeah,
cases where you want to maximize experimentation, and other cases where you will
yes,
have standardized work.
yes. Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there were some patterns in what, in terms of how you're going about it, and I'm just going to go back a little bit. There's some patterns, some success patterns, I think, in what you were saying there. So federated support was one of the success patterns I heard you talk about there, Rob, when you said there's a
Hmm.
central ways of working support team.
Yes,
Center of
yes,
enablement is a term that I like to
yeah,
use. And then you said the business
yes,
divisions each have their own ways of working centers of enablement. So,
yes, yeah.
so that sounds to me like a fairly common success pattern. Is that you see that working well in terms of being able to provide the context relevant support?
Yeah, generally, I mean, listen, there's always opportunity for improvement, but in terms of, um, even the specific way that we've affected that model for us within Wealth Management Americas, we've taken an opportunity to, particularly in those centers of enablement, to infuse new talent and new perspectives, but also ensure that we have the right balance of people that really know the culture and know the org, and have that background. So that mix has been very powerful as we've continued to challenge um, our ways of working, but be mindful in terms of what's going to work in our environment. So yeah, I think that in general that transformation has been successful, and again allowing us to kind of adapt for our own local context, because the business we support, even in the context of UBS, the business we support in Wealth Management Americas is different than the maybe the wealth management model in some of the other divisions, and our technology challenges are different than the technology challenges of other divisions that we have. So us being able to have that appropriate kind of federation and some degree um, to take the playbook as the starting point, to take some of the prescriptions of the guardrails as the starting point, and then really influence our own journey, has been so far effective. And again, we're kind of at a little bit early stage, right? I mean, we have some legacy of these ways of working as well. And when I came in, I was one of the things I led was a small team that was basically our unscaled version of Agile. We had five teams that were doing Scrum, like basic Scrum, um, but we've continued to kind of evolve that. So yeah.
And in terms of where you're at right now, you said you're relatively early in the journey. What are some of the are some of the benefits that you're either seeing or hearing or perceiving right now? What's going well?
Um, I think we're seeing a lot more interest and exploration in basically confirming the demand hypothesis, right? So let's go talk to our end users, but within the context of the iteration as well. So like, whereas maybe previously we would have done a lot of upfront exploration, sometimes even used external consultancies or pretty heavily used external consultancies. Um, Nothing against them, that's where I came from, but right, like, how do we internalize some of that? But really bringing that into the cadence, so we're doing continuous discovery, and we are constantly challenging what's in our backlog and our book of work that we feel confident is the right thing to do, and maybe we don't need to test to versus what are some demand hypotheses that we need to continue to get in front of clients. So that ability to think in client terms and to think more or just end user terms in general, that is, we've seen that take hold with a lot of our teams. The collaboration across our business and product and technology teams continues to improve. The outcomes focus, that's a big shift, right? To shift from very much scope driven conversations, and listen, we still have some of that as well, right? But the changing the conversation is the precursor to really then starting to say, okay, well, can we actually measure that? Can we actually prove it? All those things, and how do we pivot our capacity based upon attainment of that? That that's been great, and then the focus has changed as well, right? So we had a lot of you know, it, many of our projects were waterfall projects. Many of our projects were very large projects. We had kind of put people to the work, and really allowing those, and so we had people context switching all the time. So really getting teams focused and aligned to the product that they're supporting and collaborating with their product owner. That's been a massive and useful and change as well.
Great. And then the flip question: what are some of the biggest challenges? What are some of the biggest headwinds?
I think the so I've used an analogy with some of our teams of uh, a lot of our teams were playing American football. I put the quality. I don't know how global your podcast is. So American football, right? So we had large teams on the field. We had an offense and then a defense, and basically in some cases it feels like overnight we basically said, well, now you're going to play basketball, and here's the playbook, and go play basketball, right? And we have a lot of people that are athletes, and so some of them are able to very quickly adapt. We have people that maybe played basketball, right? That were on the football team, but then moved over. But it's definitely not enough just to hand over the playbook. So a lot of there are some teams that are uh, that have struggled because of expectations on them. There are some teams that have struggled because of expectations on themselves. They want to improve faster, they want to learn faster, but I think we have to recognize what a massive change it is, particularly for those teams that were playing American football, right? That you don't just kind of get on the court and start scoring baskets all the time, but the mindset of we're not marching down the field anymore. We're expecting you to put up shots every time you go back, and you're going back and down the field, and you're playing offense and defense. That is, I think it's easy to underestimate that change. And so, to the extent that we've seen tension, it's exactly the tension you would expect from that massive of a transformation, and it is massive for the teams. But they also, most of them see it. Most of them are like, I actually like playing basketball better, right?
Yeah,
It's more
yeah.
fun,
Don't make
right?
me go back to playing
So
American football.
right, yeah. So it's not a perfect analogy, but I think it
Yeah,
very well
great
expresses kind of
analogy.
the magnitude of changes that we've experienced. Yeah.
Yeah. And how in your experience, Rob, how long does it take for an organization to go from playing American football to learn how to play basketball?
I don't know because we're not quite there yet, but I would say, I mean, in terms of some of the experiences I've seen prior as well, and just being an observer of the transformations, I mean, it really is a 2 to 3 year journey, right? It could be 5 year journey, and to some extent, to the conversation we were having earlier, it's a never ending journey, right? So like, you're continuing to improve your ways. I mean, it's the whole point of doing retrospectives and having feedback loops. But in terms of kind of the ambition we have now, or what we think works and what has worked in some of the other divisions, it's going to be another couple of years. And we just brought another within our own kind of transformation at Wealth Management Americas. We brought another large cohort in to our ways of working, and so yeah, I mean, for those people, it's gonna be, some of them will be kind of up and running and full speed in 6 months, and some of them it'll take a couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's measured in years, isn't it? Not months.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And you can also, I think, you can do a reorg. You can change how teams are structured. You could go from an American football structure to a basketball structure, but then there's the realization that actually this is just day one. And we're still trying to play
yes.
American football with a basketball, wearing
Right,
wearing a
exactly.
different kit.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness, this is day one. We're in squads, tribes, chapters, and guilds, but actually this is just the beginning.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Um,
the other thing is just it because we have been, and I don't think we're unique in this, so delivery focused and dates focused and output focused, it's hard to kind of move away from that scope mindset. It's hard to have the conversation of, um, I want to drive from New York City to San Francisco and I want to be there in 5 days, right? To, yeah, but what if certain roads closed, or what if you kind of decide that you actually want to go to San Diego instead? Like, you're still going to the West Coast, like directionally you're still like, but that's not the right uh place to stop. There may be mechanical issues, there may be tech debt, i.e. You don't want to be driving from one city to another with a flat tire the whole way, right? It's going to slow you down. So like, all those things is, how do we continue to embrace this so that we can be more confident in those target outcomes and not be so fixed on the scope that we agreed to. But there's still, just like any large organization, there's still a legacy of that is, okay, this is the scope you agreed to.
yeah.
And, our teams are struggling with that as well, in terms of how do we unwind from that? How do we make sure that we're not just moving from, okay, let me re-express the BRD and the cadence of a user story, right? But how do we, truly embrace the value of user stories and user story mapping and the conversational mechanism of that, or value of that, and allow ourselves to, on our journey from New York City to somewhere on the West Coast, look for the signposts, look for, the things that we need to do to adapt our story, and but also maybe take advantage of things that we weren't expecting. That it's like, oh, I'd actually like to stop here and have a great meal, or whatever it is on that
Yeah,
on
yeah.
that journey. So we've seen, that transformation dimension as well.
Yeah, that takes quite a big shift, doesn't it, for leaders, for
Yeah,
people, leaders at all levels in all roles. It's
yeah,
a big mental leap from, the plan says San Francisco, but hang on a minute, why are we going to
yeah,
San Francisco? Is it to sit on the beach? Is it
right,
to go shopping? Is it to go to nice restaurants? And then, as you said, maybe there's
yeah,
smog or fog, and actually, like you said, maybe San Francisco helps us achieve our outcome better. San Diego helps us achieve our outcome better than San Francisco,
yeah,
but the plan says San
yeah,
Francisco, so we're not going to change. So yeah,
yeah.
so
Which
yeah,
says, and to that point, I mean, which says, and I think in some cases, because of the waterfall legacy, having some uncertainty about your ultimate destination, I think, gives some people anxiety. But that's not to say you can't start making your way to the West Coast, right? It's just because you're not 100% confident that you're going to end up in San Francisco doesn't mean you can't start driving from New York City to Pittsburgh,
exactly,
right? That
exactly.
that I that part I know, and that's the whole
Yeah,
point,
and
right?
and to
Yeah.
articulate it as explicitly as a hypothesis, we think that going to San
Yes.
Francisco will result
Yes.
in whatever it is,
Yes.
shopping, eating,
Yes.
sunshine, whatever.
Yes. Right.
We'll only know
Yeah.
that as we get closer to the West Coast and we check the weather forecast. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yes.
and then
Yeah. Yeah.
pivot.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
So, last question, Rob,
Yeah.
which is your advice for anyone who's a leader, and again, leaders at all levels in all roles, including individual contributors. This doesn't need to be people oversight. So, given your top three learnings of approach agility with agility, not a waterfall
Yeah.
approach, inspire over inflict, and meet people where
Yeah.
they're at. What would your advice be to someone who is a leader, related to those top three learnings in terms of how they should lead? And maybe if you could include in your thoughts as well, what if a particular leader wants to make progress on these things, but there are more senior leaders who maybe aren't exhibiting those behaviors, and what would your advice be to someone in that situation?
Yeah. So let me address the latter one first. Is um, just as we were talking about earlier, there are some very clear attributes of these new ways of working that I think there's some subset of those that you could gain agreement around. We have a shared ambition or shared goal to achieve, these ways of working outcomes, or to get stuff out the door quicker, right? Or there's something there. There's some commonality, and I think it's to focus your attention on those to the extent that you're um, trying to prove it out and trying to get permission to go those things. You don't have to attack every single one of them. You don't. I definitely wouldn't come in with some kind of external playbook of, bank down the street does this, so therefore we should do this, or I read this article and therefore we should do this. Um, but have that conversation around, again, outcomes, but in different types of, not client driven outcomes or market outcomes, but outcomes for the team, and which ones do you agree on, and make an agreement with that leader around, if you achieve these outcomes, can you then take it to the next level? Can you then scale it or bring it to other teams, or try the next experiment? um, in terms of, what was the first question you had again? I'm sorry.
Is if you're a leader, and you want to, within your own sphere of
Oh,
influence and control, you want to approach agile with agility, inspire over inflict, and meet people where they're at. What would your advice be in terms
yeah.
of, well, how do I get going? What behaviors should I exhibit?
Yeah. I think the the first one is, you really have to build the the mindset shift first, right? That is a precondition to the successful embracing of the ways that the different teams are doing. And I do think kind of shifting um, to the extent a senior leader has influence, and how do you shift the funding models, and how do you shift the incentive models, that can start to come and play very early on in putting that structure. People will migrate to what they're incented to do. So by definition, if you start to focus on outcomes, it will have the effect of changing some of the organization. And then I think, just my personal learning is, um, be open and curious about what other organizations are doing, of not assuming that you have the right answer, that not assuming that a model that worked in one organization could work with yours, but continue. And then, just like A.G. Lofley would do in product development, from P&G, get get out there with the like, be in the mud sometimes, right? To
Mm.
see like what's really happening, what's really resonating, because the team is the fundamental unit of value. So it's very easy to kind of be part of QBR marketplaces, or to the extent that you have a team of teams model, to interact with that kind of highest level aggregation of those teams. Um, but it's important to be with that key unit of value and understand what's happening on the ground, because if it's not working, it's probably not working because of that, not because of all the other stuff that you've put into place.
I love that. Go see.
Yes.
Walk
Yeah.
floors.
Gemba walk.
Gemba walk. I love that. I love
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Rob. It's been a pleasure. It's been really insightful, been really interesting. Thank you very much for sharing. And I hope you enjoy your trip to the West Coast to play basketball.
Thank you, John. Always good talking to you.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay.